dismantled, that the United States' Asian allies and friends should loosen their U.S. ties, and that failure to do so will inevitably produce a negative PRC reaction, that U.S. efforts to maintain its current presence and power in Asia are dimensions of an American attempt to contain China and therefore must be condemned and resisted, that U.S. military power projection in the region is dangerous and should be reduced even as the PLA continues to build up its military capabilities with the clear objective of reducing U.S. military options in the context of a U.S.-China confrontation, and that the U.S. economic model is fundamentally exploitative and should have no application in Asia. To not take seriously official Chinese government statements along these lines is to not take China seriously. That Beijing does not hope to realize these policy goals in the short term does not reduce their potential undermining effect in the decades ahead. In short, if China were to achieve the policy objectives contained in these official statements, it would clearly replace the United States as Asia's leading power. If that does not represent a PRC grand strategy, what would? Second, some may say that the analysis and policy recommendations in this report are too pessimistic, based on a worst-case appraisal of Chinese behavior. To the contrary, we draw our conclusions from China's current actions regarding its internal and external security, its neighbors, and U.S. presence in Asia. We project nothing that is not already apparent in China's present policies and strategic intentions. Nevertheless, this hardly represents the worst case if China began
up in the United States for war with China. Why? Well, once again, people actually wrote why. You have to know where to look, but if you look at the Council on Foreign Relations, an article by a former colleague of mine, Robert Blackwell and Ashley Tellis, in 2015, they say that China has become so powerful that it threatens American primacy, and China's rise is no longer in America's interest. And so you watch this mentality in the U.S. go into effect. Suddenly, because China's economically successful, they're not just economically successful, they're the enemy. Right. So everything becomes rhetoric. How many wars has China been in the last 40 years?
Let me count them. That would be zero. Not one war in 40 years. When was the most recent war that China was in? January 16 to February 16, 1979. 1 month in a conflict with Vietnam, which had to do actually with the Vietnam having overthrown a government in Cambodia. Okay. 1 month. We are not at dire risk from China. China is not mass murdering its population, but we are gearing up in the United States for war with China. Why? Well, once again, people actually wrote why. You have to know where to look, but if you look at the Council on Foreign Relations, an article by a former colleague of mine, Robert Blackwell and Ashley Tellis, in 2015, they say that China has become so powerful that it threatens American primacy, and China's rise is no longer in America's interest. And so you watch this mentality in the U.S. go into effect. Suddenly, because China's economically successful, they're not just economically successful, they're the enemy. So everything becomes rhetoric. How many wars has China been in the last 40 years? Let me count them. That would be zero. Not one war in 40 years. When was the most recent war that China was in? January 16 to February 16, 1979. 1 month in a conflict with Vietnam, which had to do actually with the Vietnam having overthrown a government in Cambodia. Okay. 1 month. We are not at dire risk from China. China is not mass murdering its population, but we are gearing up in the United States for war with China. Why? Well, once again, people actually wrote why. You have to know where to look, but if you look at the Council on Foreign Relations, an article by a former colleague of mine, Robert Blackwell and Ashley Tellis, in 2015, they say
that China has become so powerful that it threatens American primacy. And China's rise is no longer in America's interest. And so you watch this mentality in the U.S. go into effect. Suddenly, because China's economically successful, they're not just economically successful, they're the enemy.
These folks always project what they're going to do. And like this gentleman just said here, they don't even just say it or project it. They actually write it out. This is a CFR, Council for Foreign Relations. If you don't know who they are, look them up, Wikipedia, or wherever you need to do your search for them. Put it in Chat GPT. Oh, man. So that's why China's the enemy. And this stuff gets fed into the media. And so this is how things like Red Note now become the enemy. Why is Red Note is their application over there. TikTok was their application over there. See how it all. Remember that one video that I made on here on YouTube way back. Global Agenda. It's that particular video I did there on Global Agenda was just one little thing, but you see that it's bigger. This is a global. I apologize. This is a global effort for global dominance. Okay? And remember, it's not just the United States. It's not those folks that came over on those sailboats, right? And did what they did to an indigenous people and then went and captured another indigenous people of their land and then brought them over here to do their work. Not just that, this is a European of descent effort for global dominance. Why? Because that particular demographic is falling off. They are already a small percentage of the world population. If you do your own due diligence, you will find that in fact, they are going extinct. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not in 10 years, but eventually you can look it up. I'm not making this stuff up, folks. So this is the kind of stuff that you get. And I'm not doing this because I'm not trying to create any friction with people of European descent. That's not my objective. My objective is to get to the truth of everything that's going on in a reality that they have created. They created this reality. They're the ones that caused these wars around the world. If they were to have left these civilizations, and they were in fact that civilizations, then this stuff wouldn't be going on in the world. These folks can manage their own situations in their own civilizations. We're talking about now Native Americans. We're talking about African countries that they infiltrated and still infiltrating and still pillaging and stealing their resources, their raw materials. I told y'all, for the people that have been following for a long time, we were going to get here. And we're here. Now we're here. Silly season's over. So you can see what's happening. So the reason I made this video is because I want folks to understand that you can't just be distracted by what's in front of you, right? And when I say distracted by what's here in front of you, I'm talking about mass media here in the United States, where they use everything from movies, commercials, sports, especially sports. You can't turn on any broadcast now that first of all, that the media, the news media is sending out their own propaganda. Okay. Right. Who owns those? We know who owns all the mass media. Then you have the sports is on every single, if you notice, see, I'm an older dude. I come from a generation from back in the 60s and 70s. Okay. That's my time period of birth. And I had to search high and low to find a basketball. Maybe an NBA game came on maybe once a week. Maybe once a week on television. Now, double headers, triple headers, different channels. I'm just talking about basketball. We're not even going to get into football. Football, not only do they have televised pro games, but they have televised college games now. Not only do they just have men's sports, but they have women's sports. Do you see how and so all of that's going on, and these folks over here, let me pull it up for you. These folks over here, these folks are setting the agenda for the entire planet. Are you following what I'm saying now? So I know it's a lot. My job is, it's not my job. First of all, I'm retired. My effort is to educate folks, just to at least be more aware of what's going on around you and everything that you do, every purchase that you make, every trip that you go on, every person that you talk to, every society that you join. Just understand, for instance, before I get off here, use this as an example. When I was a little thing, my peoples got me into the Cub Scouts. Started in the Cub Scouts, then the Weeblos, then the Boy Scouts. And I'm going to tell you this quick story time. I remember when I was in the Boy Scouts, this is when I was over in Germany. My family was in Germany. My father worked for one of those 3-letter agencies. He's passed on now. He probably wouldn't mind me saying that. So we were stationed over in West Germany. And we were out on a Boy Scout camping excursion. And I'll never forget this. And so in the middle of the night, they came around to each of our tents. You know, you could hear shuffling going on and whatnot. And then they said, you know, wake up, and keep in mind, it was chilly. I'll never forget it was chilly because we had our sleeping bags and we were kind of, you know. So they got us up and they marched us through the woods. And in the distance, we could see a campfire, a big old fire. Right? What do they call those? A bonfire, B-O-N. Shuffled us in. It's dark, of course, but you got the fire going on. And they had these wooden things, these like wooden bleachers made up, like logs. And we all sat up in there. And then they had a ceremony called the Order of the Arrow. So anybody, I'm not telling anything that's like secret or anything like that. You can look all this stuff up. You type that in, Order of the Arrow, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So that's a ritual, okay? That's a ritual. Who created that? Who created that? So it was prepping us for how rituals and how you have to go through a, what do you call that? Like an initiation to move up in society. And so if you notice, folks that pay attention, all your top people, your astronauts and some presidents, and you look back in their past and guess where a lot of them have started out? Guess what a lot of them have in their past? They were Boy Scouts. So what I'm saying is all of that leads to this. And these folks are the ones, these folks were in the Girl Scouts, in the Boy Scouts. Because that's where they groom you. See, the United States does it a little differently. They try to mask it and make it look like it's, you know, on up and up and everything is legit, right? The other countries where we call our enemies, like China, like Russia, and we see them with their children and what they're doing, have them running obstacle courses when they're 5 and 6. I'm speaking of China now. And we say that's that's abuse, and that's no, it's not. It's the same thing. We just try to make it over here in the West, make it look glamorous and dramatic for effect to get folks, the youngins, interested. We're just beginning, folks. We're just beginning. I'll see you guys in another video. Take care of yourselves.